Chester, the worldly pig. Of all things, grumbled Chester, why on earth did I have to be a pig? A pig is no better off than a cabbage or a carrot, just something to eat. But before I end up as so much sausage and ham, I intend to try and amount to something. But what else could a pig ever be? That was Chester's main problem, and he turned this around and around in his head until one day it suddenly came to him. I'll be a star in the circus. What gave Chester such an outlandish idea was a circus poster which appeared on the barn wall one sunny morning in May. And what caught the little pig's eye was a seal with a ball balanced on the tip of its nose. The nose, said Chester. That's the thing. Surely my flat pig snout must be good for something. And he searched the pig pen for an idea. There was only a trough, a fence, and a mud puddle. The trough is much too cumbersome, he decided, and I can't very well balance on a fence or a mud puddle on my nose, so it'll have to work just the other way around. I'll balance my nose on something, on the flat top of a fence post. Anyone knows that a pig can't climb, but Chester couldn't let this bit of useless knowledge hold him down, and with a slight boost from an overturned bucket, he struggled up the side of the fence until he was finally perched on the top rail. Now came the tricky part. Placing his snout squarely on the post, he carefully raised one hind leg in the air, then the other, and with a flurry of short kicks, he launched his body up over his head. And for an instant, he teetered upside down on his nose. Then down he tumbled to land with a sploosh in the feed trough. Well, so far so bad, he muttered. But Chester had no idea of quitting. Before he ever mastered the trick, he expected to take quite a few such tumbles, and indeed he did. He took hundreds of tumbles that day, and by nightfall he was a very weary and badly bruised pig. But surprisingly enough, his spirits were high. The last effort had been a great improvement, and he held his balance for what he guessed to be a full minute. And the next morning, after a few more tumbles, Chester had mastered the impossible feat. He could stand on his nose for as long as he pleased, and now he was all set to be discovered. This was no problem. It had been figured out from the beginning. A railroad ran right past the farm, and the pig was sure that sooner or later the circus train would be coming by there. Whenever he heard a locomotive chugging far down the track, he scrambled up the fence and quickly went into his nose stand. He was always ready, just in case. Then, sure enough, early one morning there came the circus train with its long flat cars loaded with animal wagons and tent poles, followed by the elegant red coaches. As the coaches rambled by, Chester could tell from his upside-down view that all the window shades were drawn. On the train between towns, the weary circus people always try to catch up with their sleep, so no one happened to see the pig on the post. Oh, well, sighed Chester, it looks like I'll have to take a trip. And he scrambled to the ground outside the fence and set off down the railroad track. It was as simple as that. There was no need to worry about the farmer, for he was always so busy he didn't even know he owned a little spotted pig. And when Chester went trotting by the field where he was plowing, the man merely chuckled. Well, now, it appears to me that somebody's pig pen could stand a little fixin'. Chester realized that the circus might have gone a long way before stopping to set up the tents, no telling how far. So he settled down to a good steady dog trot with his eyes fixed on the track just ahead. And before he knew it, there was the big top, and he stopped with an oink of surprise. This huge mountain of canvas looming above a bustling city of tents and wagons was almost too much for a little farm pig to take all at once, and at first he could only stare in amazement. Then sternly he warned himself, "If I lose nerve now, I'm through before I start. So if I'm going to be a big star, it's time I got used to big things. The bigger the better." And with renewed courage, he went trotting ahead into the bustling circus lot. Chester was nimble and quick for a pig, and he managed to dodge and sidestep his way through the army of hustling roustabouts without getting kicked or stepped on. When he came to an open space near the back door of the big top, he picked out a tent stake exactly the right height, and on his very first try went into a perfect nose stand. Then in no time at all, Chester was discovered by the circus tall man. "Hey, everybody," he shouted. "Look at that little old pig way down there." And suddenly Chester was the center of attention, with everyone talking at once.
"Say, that's a pretty nifty trick."
"A real ding-dong doozy."
"Why, he's a natural-born acrobat. Where did he come from?"
"What's the difference? Let's put him in the show." And Chester was hustled away to a dressing tent. Two attendants tied a red ribbon around his middle, fastened a feathery plume on his head, and gave his precious snout a bit of a shine with a dab of pink shoe polish. And the next thing the little pig knew, he was riding into the big top at the head of the grand parade on a magnificent white stallion led by a beautiful circus queen. "It just can't be true," thought Chester, tingling with excitement. "This must be a glorious dream. It's much too good to last." And indeed, it was too good to last. In a very short while the glorious dream turned into more of a nightmare. For to Chester's horror, when the main show began, he found himself in the big cage with 5 ferocious tigers. Someone had decided the small pig's act must be more spectacular. It needed an element of danger, and the ringmaster's booming voice filled the tent as he announced the spectacular new act. "Now, for the very first time anywhere, we proudly present Perniceval, the performing pig. The one and the only pig with the dauntless courage and daring ever to perform in the very same arena with savage beasts of the jungle." Just as the announcement was finished, the courageous Percival fainted, and he was quickly carried out of the big cage amid a storm of hooting and jeering from the angry spectators. Chester was quickly revived with a splash of cold lemonade. Then he was dressed in baby clothes with a lace bonnet tied under his chin, and Roscoe the clown in a frilly skirt and flowered hat wheeled him around the big top in a dolly buggy. A rippling wave of laughter followed after them, and someone squealed, "Oh, what a darling, adorable little pig!" and after 5 or 6 trips around the tent, the poor pig had turned almost the color of the clown's needle nose. Late that night, after the last performance, Roscoe took off his costume and makeup. Then, without so much as one glance at Chester, he turned down the lamp and crawled into bed, leaving the disgruntled pig chained to a tent post and still wearing the miserable bonnet and dress. There was no wriggling out of it, for the ribbon was tied in a double knot under his chin, so he suspected that as long as he was Roscoe's pig, this would be his costume day and night. Well, one thing, vowed Chester, I'll give this old clown the slip the first chance I get. Chester's first chance came on the very first train trip. Roscoe hadn't bothered to chain his pet pig. He kept him under the seat with his suitcase, figuring if the pig got loose on the train, he wouldn't get far. But Chester figured otherwise, and as the clown was lighting a cigar, he squirted from under the seat and went racing through the aisle. Roscoe was surprisingly spry for an old fellow, and halfway down the car, the big clown's feet were slapping close at the panicky pig's heels. He would have caught Chester for sure if the tall man hadn't left a long leg in the aisle. Old Roscoe tripped and went sprawling, and by the time he picked himself off the floor, the pig had reached the caboose and squeezed his way out of the door. Then, in desperation, Chester leaped off the back platform to go sliding and tumbling over a steep embankment and down into a dense pine forest, where he was stopped, kerwump, by the broad backside of a bear. The big hairy beast whirled around with a snort of surprise, for he had never seen a pig wearing baby clothes before. But then at the same time, Chester had never seen a big hairy bear before, and for a brief instant they sat blinking at one another. Then one savage snarl from the bear sent the terrified pig squealing off into the wilderness, plowing headlong through brambles and brush, then frantically leaping the fallen timbers. This time Chester was running for his life, and the bear was close on his trail, eating up the distance in long, easy strides. He was only one jump away, when all of a sudden he stopped with a snort and stood up. The pig had run straight for the camp of 3 tattered old tramps, and the bear wanted no part of them. His last meeting with men had cost him a piece of one ear, so with a grumbling growl he turned and lumbered off. No wonder the bear was so scared, thought Chester, after taking one look at the 3 fierce faces overgrown with beards, rusty red, grizzled gray, and bushy black. They were enough to scare anyone. So Chester decided to take his chances in the woods, but not quite quickly enough. Just as he turned to go, the Redbeard sprang and in one wild grab seized the flying cape, jerked the pig off his feet, then stuffed him in snout first into a sack.
"Can't leave you out here in the woods, piggy," he muttered as he tied the top of the sack. "It's not safe."
"He's safe enough now," grinned the graybeard, "at least till supper time."
"Now we all need is beans," said Blackbeard. "Nothing like pork and beans." "Turnip greens," said Graybeard. "They're the best with roast pig." "Oh no," growled Red. "He's going to be boiled with a batch of sauerkraut."
Just then a train whistle echoed through the pines, and the three tramps quickly gathered up their gear, strapped on their packs, and hurried off through the woods toward the railroad, with Redbeard toting the pig sack.